What happens when a bowling coach tries to publicly humiliate someone only to discover they've challenged none other than Kim Soo-hyun himself? Believe me, by the end of this story, you'll see Kim Soo-hyun in a way you never expected. If you're a fan of extraordinary moments when celebrities prove their hidden talents, hit that subscribe button right now because this story will leave you speechless. This is about the day a prestigious bowling coach learned a lesson in humility from one of Korea's most beloved actors. At Seoul's Olympic Bowling Center, Coach Park Min-ho was known for two things: his expertise in professional bowling techniques and his growing inclination to belittle newcomers he deemed unworthy. That evening, as casual bowlers filled the lanes, something felt different. Instead of the usual technical advice, the digital scoreboard displayed a flashy message. Today's theme: redefining bowling priorities. At the back of the alley, a man, dressed in a simple black hoodie and jeans, stood silently. Unlike the other bowlers around him, he wasn't there for casual entertainment. It was Kim Soo-hyun, the renowned Korean actor. Though the world knew him for his breakthrough performances in It's Okay to Not Be Okay and My Love from the Star, what few realized was that behind his charismatic screen presence hid a profound love for bowling, a sport he had practiced obsessively during his military service and continued to perfect in private over the years. Coach Park began his evening session, but it wasn't about proper bowling techniques. Instead, he spoke about the need to change bowling priorities, reducing emphasis on technical precision and focusing on what he called natural talent and social status in the real world. Some bowlers exchanged uncomfortable glances, realizing that the instruction was turning into an ideological speech rather than a coaching session. Then Kim Soo-hyun calmly raised his hand. Coach Park hesitated for a moment, slightly narrowing his eyes. He hadn't expected interruptions, much less from someone he didn't recognize as a regular. Ignoring him, he continued flipping through slides that showed statistics about celebrity endorsements instead of bowling techniques. Some of you, he said, fixing his gaze on certain bowlers, might need to accept that your privilege has given you an unfair advantage in this sport. Kim Soo-hyun kept his hand raised patiently. The bowlers began whispering among themselves, some looking at him attentively, while others exchanged curious glances, but the coach still wouldn't acknowledge him. Instead, Coach Park continued with his speech. For example, he proceeded with a more direct tone. Family connections and wealth can create artificial advantages in sports. The implication was clear, and several bowlers turned to see how Kim Soo-hyun would react. However, his expression remained serene, his hand still raised high. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Coach Park sighed and nodded toward him. "Yes, sir," he said with a tone of amusement in his voice. "Do you have something to contribute to our discussion about privilege in bowling?" The bowling alley fell completely silent. Everyone recognized Kim Soo-hyun as a famous actor, but few knew about his genuine passion for bowling and his love for the sport. He was often seen debating with experts in technology, economy, and sports. When he lowered his hand and began to speak, nobody could foresee what was about to happen. His voice was calm, measured, and respectful. "Coach Park, bowling is fundamental to understand both precision and applied physics. Many of us, including myself, are here today to deepen our knowledge of this discipline. Reducing the core training plan could harm all bowlers, regardless of their background." Some bowlers nodded in agreement, but the coach's expression hardened. He wasn't about to let someone, no matter how famous, challenge his authority without consequences. Kim Soo-hyun made a brief pause before speaking again, his voice firm but serene. Reducing the academic bowling curriculum would harm all players, regardless of their origin. Several bowlers nodded again, visibly relieved that someone had the courage to question the coach's retreat from technical rigor. But Coach Park's gaze grew even more severe. He crossed his arms, and his tone of voice took on a sarcastic edge. "Mr. Kim," he said, emphasizing his name with a slight dismissive smile. Perhaps you more than anyone should understand how privilege determines our bowling system. After all, not everyone has the luxury of private coaches or elite training. What happened next left the entire bowling alley in shock. What do you think of the story so far? Let us know in the comments below, and keep watching to see what happened. Next, instead of becoming defensive, Kim Soo-hyun simply smiled, a warm, understanding smile. There wasn't a trace of arrogance in his expression, but rather genuine humility. "You're right about something, Coach," he said thoughtfully. "I've been fortunate in my training, and precisely for that reason, I believe we have a responsibility to maintain high technical standards so that everyone, regardless of their background, has a real opportunity to develop their potential." A flash of uncertainty appeared on Coach Park's face. He hadn't expected that response, but he quickly regained his composure and leaned forward with an even more sarcastic tone. "And you believe you know more than an average coach about how to maintain bowling standards?" he asked with a mocking smile. "Tell me, Mr. Kim, what makes you an expert in bowling technique?" Kim Soo-hyun remained calm, with the same serene expression as always. "I don't claim to be an expert," he responded without hesitation. "I'm just someone who appreciates the beauty of bowling and believes it transcends social divisions." He pointed to the lane that remained empty, without a single bowling pin set up. "Instead of debating about privileges," he continued, "why don't we take advantage of this time to explore the incredible complexities of bowling? After all, that's why we're here, isn't it?" The bowling alley fell into a tense silence. "Coach," Park's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Nothing else to say?" he snapped. Then he turned toward the lane and picked up a bowling ball. "Very well, Mr. Kim. If you're so passionate about bowling, let's put that passion to the test." He began to set up quickly, moving with precision and determination. The bowlers were stunned to see the challenge taking form. It wasn't a simple bowling exercise. It was a complex pattern of pins set in an unusual formation, a type of challenge that even professional bowlers would find difficult. Some whispered nervously, "This is way above amateur level," someone murmured. But Kim Soo-hyun's expression didn't change. He didn't seem surprised or intimidated. Coach Park turned to him with a mocking smile. "Since you're so concerned about maintaining standards, why don't you solve this?" he said in an ironic tone. "Unless, of course, you'd prefer to go back to talking about politics and your supposed privileges." The challenge hung in the air. Some bowlers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, recognizing that this wasn't a simple technical test, but a deliberate attempt at public humiliation. But Kim Soo-hyun didn't flinch. He stood up, adjusted the cuffs of his hoodie, and walked calmly toward the lane with absolute calm. His movements were confident, measured, without a hint of nervousness. Coach Park's smile widened, convinced he had cornered him. He had specifically chosen this pin pattern because it required advanced techniques that he hadn't taught in his sessions. But when Kim Soo-hyun took the bowling ball from his hand and observed the pattern with genuine curiosity rather than intimidation, something in the coach's expression changed. For the first time, his smile faltered slightly. Kim turned to the audience before beginning. "I've noticed this pattern has several possible approaches," he said with a calm and reflective voice. "Would you prefer I use the standard method, or would you like to see a more efficient solution I learned from studying the original work of Coach Kim Ji-hoon?" Coach Park froze. The casual reference to Kim Ji-hoon's studies caught him completely by surprise. "Have you read Kim Ji-hoon's original work?" he asked, unable to hide his astonishment. Kim Soo-hyun nodded effortlessly. "Yes," he responded simply. "The translations don't fully capture the elegance of his methodology." A murmur ran through the bowling alley. This wasn't going as the coach had planned. When Kim Soo-hyun turned toward the lane with the ball in hand, everyone held their breath, because something extraordinary was about to happen. Kim looked up at the coach and calmly repeated, "But perhaps we should let the bowling speak for itself." The silence in the room deepened. The coach's challenge had just taken an unexpected turn. When Kim Soo-hyun took his first step toward the approach, nobody, not even the coach, could foresee what was about to happen. The bowlers watched in stunned silence as his body moved with precision and confidence. Each step was clear, deliberate, and surprisingly elegant. But what truly captivated the audience wasn't just that he was solving the challenge, but how he explained each step with impeccable clarity. This first step, he explained with serenity, uses a technique developed by Park Sung-woo in 2015. His body moved effortlessly into position. This simplifies what seems complex into something much more accessible. Coach Park's confidence began to waver. He followed his work with attention, realizing that Kim Soo-hyun wasn't just solving the challenge, but was teaching it. Several bowlers instinctively took out their phones to record the moment. Even those who normally struggled with bowling understood his approach. Then Kim Soo-hyun reached a crucial point in the execution. "Now," he said calmly, "we have two possible paths." He turned to Coach Park. "The traditional method would take us to another lane entirely," he explained. "But there's a more elegant method that uses your own original ideas, Coach. Which do you prefer?" Coach Park froze. His previous air of superiority had completely disappeared. This was no longer just a matter of bowling preferences. It was a subtle but undeniable reminder of his own knowledge. The same knowledge he had so easily dismissed moments before. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, something unexpected happened. A hand rose from the middle of the bowling alley. It was Lee Ji-eun, one of the most reserved bowlers. "Could we see both solutions?" she asked. "This is actually helping me understand better the technique we saw last week." Kim Soo-hyun smiled warmly and then turned to Coach Park. He raised an eyebrow in a silent gesture. His answer would reveal more than his bowling preferences. It would show if he was willing to acknowledge that a teaching moment could transcend personal differences. Before he could answer, the alley door opened abruptly. Manager Kang, a known ally of Coach Park and his academic and political inclinations, burst into the room. "Min-ho, we need you to come to an urgent staff meeting about the changes in the training curriculum." The timing couldn't have been worse for Coach Park, or perhaps it couldn't have come at a better time. Coach Park seized the opportunity. "We'll have to continue this demonstration another time," he said, trying to regain control of the situation. But before he could walk away, Kim Soo-hyun spoke. His voice, though serene, carried a tone of authority that even made the manager stop. "Coach," he said calmly, "you challenged me to solve this problem in front of everyone." The bowling alley erupted in murmurs. Leaving now would give an unfortunate lesson about athletic integrity. Manager Kang's face reddened. "Young man, are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything, sir," interrupted Kim Soo-hyun, polite but firm. "I'm stating a fact. Coach Park launched his challenge publicly to prove a point about privilege and merit. I accepted. The only question is, will you live up to your own challenge?" The tension in the room was electric. Several bowlers continued recording with their phones, feeling they were witnessing something historic. Coach Park seemed trapped between his ally and his own actions. The manager shifted uncomfortably, not knowing whether to impose his authority or back down. Then Kim Soo-hyun did something unexpected. He extended the bowling ball to the coach. "Or perhaps," he said with a slight smile, "you would prefer to show us your solution first. After all, as you mentioned earlier, family connections shouldn't matter, only knowledge. And surely as our coach, you can solve the same challenge you presented, right?" A sepulchral silence filled the room. Coach Park looked at the ball in his hand. For the first time since the class began, he realized he had fallen into a trap that he himself had built. Kim Soo-hyun's words floated in the air like a challenge no one had foreseen. "Would you prefer to show us your solution first?" he asked with a calm but firm voice. "After all, as you said before, only knowledge should matter." The silence was deafening. Coach Park clutched the ball tightly. For the first time, The manager's presence no longer seemed like a rescue, but another witness to what was about to happen. The air was charged with tension. The bowlers held their breath. Phones continued recording. They knew they were witnessing a decisive moment. Coach Park tried to speak but stopped. His hand trembled slightly as he looked at the pin pattern he had set up. The same challenge he had deliberately chosen to humiliate someone else, and now it loomed over him like a sword. Kim Soo-hyun noticed the doubt in his eyes, but instead of insisting or pressing, he did something unexpected. "Perhaps," he said in a soft voice without mockery, "we could solve it together. Sometimes collaboration leads to better understanding." The bowling alley held its breath. There was no triumph in his tone, no arrogance. It was a genuine offer, an opportunity to turn a moment of conflict into something constructive. But Coach Park's pride wouldn't allow him to accept it. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, throwing the ball to the floor. "All of this is nothing but a privileged celebrity trying to undermine my authority." The alley was in shock. The manager, sensing that the situation was quickly spiraling out of control, tried to intervene. "Let's all take a step back," he said, cautiously. But Kim Soo-hyun's voice cut through the air calmly. He said nothing more, just firmly picked up the ball and stepped forward. He turned toward the lane and, in a demonstration of pure bowling mastery, executed both solutions, the traditional method and Kim Ji-hoon's approach, in less than 5 minutes. When he knocked down the last pin, the bowling alley erupted in spontaneous applause. Not even the manager could hide his amazement. But what happened next would change not just the evening, but the entire bowling center. Coach Park's face had gone from red to pale. His carefully constructed narrative was crumbling before his eyes. But Kim Soo-hyun wasn't finished yet, and his next words would prove that true leadership isn't about winning arguments, but building bridges. He stepped away from the lane and looked at Coach Park and the manager. "The beauty of bowling," he said calmly, "is that it doesn't care about politics, background, or prejudices. It only cares about truth." He pointed to the fallen pins. "These patterns teach us something important, not just about bowling, but about learning itself. When we let our preconceived ideas cloud our judgment, we lose the opportunity to grow." The manager cleared his throat as if trying to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Kim, although your bowling skills are impressive, you must understand that—" A voice sounded from the back of the alley. It was Young Min-ho, a scholarship athlete who almost never spoke. "Should we learn less bowling technique just because of someone's political agenda?" A murmur ran through the crowd. One by one, the bowlers began to stand up. "I came here to learn bowling," shouted another bowler, "not to be lectured about my supposed privileges." The session that Coach Park had carefully controlled for so long was falling apart. But instead of allowing the coach to suffer further public humiliation, Kim Soo-hyun did something extraordinary. "Coach," he said loudly enough to silence the growing discord, "your technical knowledge is extensive. I've learned a lot from your technical sessions." He suggested, "Perhaps we could focus on that. I'd be happy to help other bowlers after the session, combining the coach's theoretical knowledge with practical solutions to complex challenges." The offer hung in the air, an opportunity for Coach Park to regain his dignity while improving his session. The manager watched carefully, realizing that this moment could either become a public relations disaster or transform into something unexpectedly positive. Coach Park looked at Kim Soo-hyun, and then, for the first time, really looked at his bowlers. What he saw on their faces forced him to make a decision that would change everything. His voice was barely audible when he finally spoke. He began, and then squared his shoulders. "I've made a terrible mistake." The confession seemed to cost him something, but there was a change in his attitude. "For years, I focused so much on fighting perceived privilege that I became exactly what I claimed to oppose, someone who judges based on preconceived ideas rather than on merit." He turned to Kim Soo-hyun. You didn't just solve that challenge, he said sincerely. You taught me something about true leadership. The manager stepped forward, seeing an opportunity. Perhaps this could serve as a model for other departments. But before he could turn it into an administrative victory, something unexpected happened. A commotion erupted outside the bowling alley. A crowd had gathered in the hallway, bowlers from other sessions, attracted by the viral videos being posted, in real time. Some held improvised signs written on notebook paper. The hastily scrawled signs read phrases like, "Teach bowling, not politics," "Merit over prejudice." The situation was about to spiral out of control, but once again, Kim Soo-hyun stepped forward. He approached the door and addressed the growing crowd with a voice that radiated natural authority. "If you're here because you want to learn," he said with serenity, "come in. There's room for everyone." The bowlers flooded the alley, occupying every available space. Coach Park watched in amazement as Kim Soo-hyun returned to the lane, ball in hand. "All right," he said with a smile. "Who wants to learn the practical applications of bowling in solving real challenges?" What occurred in that bowling alley during the next hour would become a legend in Seoul's sports community. But the real story wasn't about bowling or politics. It was about something much more powerful. The story of what happened in Coach Park's bowling session spread like wildfire throughout Seoul's sports community, but not in the way anyone had anticipated. Instead of becoming a tale of conflict and humiliation, it transformed into something much greater. In the weeks that followed, attendance at the advanced bowling sessions tripled. Bowlers came not just to learn techniques, they came to witness an extraordinary alliance. Coach Park, humbled but transformed by the experience, returned to his true passion, teaching bowling techniques. And Kim Soo-hyun, true to his word, began organizing study sessions that bridged the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. But the biggest change wasn't in the curriculum. It was in the culture of the bowling alley. The sessions became a place where questions were welcome, where merit truly mattered, where learning transcended political divisions. Bowlers who previously felt intimidated by the sport now excelled. One day, as Kim Soo-hyun was helping a struggling bowler master a complicated concept, Coach Park approached him. "You know," he said with a reflective tone, "that day you could have destroyed my career." He paused. "Instead, you helped me save it." He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Your father would be proud." Kim Soo-hyun's response reflected wisdom far beyond his years. "The goal was never to tear anyone down, Coach. It was to lift everyone up." That was the lesson that endured beyond the bowling alley. Today, that bowling session reminds us of something much greater than sport. It is a testimony that true education isn't about ideological struggles or political agendas. It's about the pursuit of knowledge, the value of standing up for what's right, and above all, the wisdom to do so with grace. And Kim Soo-hyun? He still sits at the back of the bowling alley. Sometimes. He still helps bowlers who struggle to understand. And he still believes that the greatest privilege of all is the opportunity to learn. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and tell us in the comments what you think of this episode. Here's a suggestion for your next video. When Kim Soo-hyun had to choose between fame and family, the decision that changed everything.